If an innocent person can be convicted while working within the established law, imagine what chance someone trying to bastardize the established law has. Hello, today is September 8, 2021, and the time is 6:10 p.m. This video is inspired by a conversation that I had with a friend earlier today who is former law enforcement and has family in law enforcement. And I say that for a reason, because this video is going to be law related. Now, what the conversation was about was a video by a lawyer in Alberta talking about, well, it's actually two parts to it, I guess, if you really want to break it down. The first part is how an individual tried to challenge the courts with, I believe it was about a improper left hand or right hand turn, and was trying to use free man on the land arguments. Now, I've done videos recently in the past year or so discussing free man on the land and to be wary of it. And I've also stated the same about 10 years ago. And I've never been an advocate of it. Again, as I've said before throughout history, and I'm going to say again, I understand their frustration with the system as it is and why they try to make these type of arguments. But regardless of how law has evolved, and there are tidbits of truth to what they say, it doesn't matter, because the law as it is, and the establishment and the justice system and everything else, society has accepted. And I talk about related things to this in other videos with, for example, the cycles of civilization and everything else. So he talks about the free man on land argument with this particular case. Now, this particular case took place in 2013, the same year that my issues began in the city of Calgary. And he's looking at it, though, from the perspective of someone who practices law, who's currently practicing law, and apparently has a good reputation, especially when it comes to firearms and everything else here in Canada. So I'm not taking anything away by saying, you know, he's looking at it from that perspective. And, you know, a lot of people who I've read through comments, as well as on his Facebook page or whatever it's called, you know, very much in support of how free man on the land arguments fail. And I'm not disagreeing, but you really have to consider that the review of that is through the perspective of someone who's actively practicing law. And that's all I really want to say about that. This is not about the free man on the land type of nonsense. But the case itself that was before the courts with regards to the Highway Traffic Act in Ontario, which I'm very familiar of, the guy won his case, but not remotely close to anything to do with the free man on the land arguments. And I can see how people, especially this individual, I believe his name is Duncan, had or would, you know, say, look at that, you know, we won. And it's like, no, you didn't win anything. And the judge was very clear on that. He won because the Crown prosecutor for this case couldn't make the case. Now, where it gets interesting and where I start to see a personal parallel is the officers ended up charging the individual with assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. And that's the part that I really want to focus on here, because I was charged, or allegedly charged, with assaulting a police officer and originally resisting arrest. And then somehow the resisting arrest part got dropped and got replaced with obstruction without even my realizing it. Now, when my case started in November of 2013, I was dealing with serious post-traumatic stress and everything was a blur for me for quite a few years actually after. But really, by the time I took over my case after terminating my second lawyer in 2015, I was still dealing with serious post-traumatic stress, but I had to overcome it because there was no one helping me. And I get why, because as a news agency in Ontario did their investigation, they found that Calgary has the most corrupt judicial and police in all of Canada. That's all I'm going to say about that. And they did some expose on that. And that was after communication with them. Interestingly, nothing, no media, nothing in Alberta was moving forward with my story, but I digress. And when you review this, the link for his video is going to be in the description box, and I'm going to give a bookmark timeline so you can skip ahead to certain parts, like for example the ruling. And so much of it just it's comical, but also, I don't know, frustrating, and reignited that bitterness, because the judge had acquitted this individual of those charges based on the reasons that I should have been acquitted. And blatantly I was convicted, despite the evidence, say the fact that the two former officers had contradicted themselves as well as each other. Neither one of them could testify who charged me with what, when. There's allegations originally that I was charged with sexual crimes of some sort, nothing even specific. And you know, I talk about this in a lot of other videos, so I'm not going to rehash all that. But they testified also that I wasn't verbally abusive, I was cooperative, they had no injuries. At one point, one of them said that when they initially arrived, that I could have tried to leave, but the fact that I remained, they continued whatever it is that in their minds thought they were doing. So, you know, whatever. And then they even admitted that the alleged bylaw stop was a pretext. The whole thing is just insane, that what I went through. But this particular case that this lawyer is talking about, it just got me frustrated again, because and even in the judge's ruling, he said 3 times he cast doubt on convicting me, 3 times. And one of the things that he said, which connects with the ruling of this particular case this judge is talking about, he said if he was wrong that the one officer was in the performance of his duties, that I should still be convicted of some sort of assault, against a common person, which doesn't even make sense. But if that officer wasn't performing his duties, then everything that took place was unlawful, and he would have been in the wrong. He would have been assaulting me. So, yeah, it's just had me really thinking all day today about what I have gone through and what I'm going through now as a result of it all. And I know the trial judge for the criminal matter, he wasn't happy. It was very clear he wasn't happy that I terminated my first lawyer, and then was really upset with me that I terminated my second lawyer. And I did say to him that there's some serious things going on, and that ties in with the threats made by the former senior counsel for the city of Calgary, who was representing the police against my lawsuit, and that is why I needed to be found guilty, because that was their defense for the lawsuit, because they were completely in the wrong. Compound all that with even the fourth lawyer that I had for the Court of Appeal, and I think it was the fifth prosecutor that was doing that one, asking me why are there things missing from the trial transcripts. So the trial transcripts can't even be relied on for anything. And the fact that in the Queen's Bench Appeal and the Court of Appeal, nobody wanted to make a ruling, refused to make a ruling on the Section 11B charter argument to be tried within a reasonable time. And when I had, I talked about this in older videos, just very frustrating. And even the Queen's Bench Appeal judge that I had seized originally was on my side. I made that clear. And we had to wait, I think, 4 or 5 months for his next availability, which was fine. And when that day, I was told by my third lawyer, because I had filed my own appeal materials for the Queen's Bench Appeal as well as the Court of Appeal. And so I figured, well, no one can really screw this up. But, well, here I am, right? They had switched judges even after the judge was seized that morning. And the third lawyer said, this is strange. They had never seen anything like that before. That is the level of corruption in the city of Calgary that I have to deal with. And if anyone gets upset with me, and you know who you are, for the fact that I keep talking about this, thank the city of Calgary for all this, my continuing to talk about all this. So anyway, you review my story. There'll be links in other links in the description box as well. For example, to my Facebook group, I think it's called a featured post. And if you click onto that, you can read the exact timeline of events and what had transpired. And that gives a pretty good detailed summary of everything. It's a long read, but it talks about my case. And then if you, putting aside this free man nonsense of what this lawyer is talking about, but the actual charges of obstruction, or not obstruction, resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer, and why Duncan was acquitted. Yeah, I was convicted despite the evidence proving my innocence. So anyway, that's kind of my little vent, my little rant on this. And a lot of people, you know, you have the 2 former officers that lost their careers over this. You have the former senior counsel for the city of Calgary who doesn't have that position anymore. And a lot of people had their careers compromised. You know, this could have been dealt with, over with minimal damage to anybody, aside from the injuries that I sustained and everything else. But it was more important for them to, I guess, make some sort of point. And in the end, nobody won. And here I am still dealing with the aftermath of all that. So for whatever it's worth, there are some other things that I want to mention in this video which slips my mind, but whatever. I think I made my point overall. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
I'm adding this bonus part to prove a point. This video does not state or imply what others should say, think, or do. Just sharing information for whatever it's worth. Whatever someone decides is totally on them. When giving testimony when the police are involved, What needs to be established by the Crown Prosecutor is your identifying them as police, peace officers, or authority to you. For example, if you do, then the standard imposed is greater because you identify them as authority. However, if you don't, then it changes the proceedings, regardless of criminal or lawsuits. This is why the Crown Prosecutor always asks if they were wearing a uniform, were the police lights on, etc. How you decide to deal with this knowledge is totally on you. The said could translate to the assumption when interacting with a police peace officer his or her status. Thus, a counter to such assumption being to establish the interaction being in their personal capacity. So does this sound like a free man on the land argument, or using established law to protect oneself, rhetorically asked? It appears to be a gray area, not openly discussed by those in law. The rub is this. As a free man on the land type would argue not consenting to contract with authority, the police and courts reserve the same right not to contract with freemen on the land nonsense. The difference being the support of the population and dealing with those who have the monopoly on violence. The corporate veil or variant of can be used to prevent such professionals being personally liable, but no, there are always ways to circumvent this, such as but not limited to a criminal act, something the governing body, such as a city's insurance, won't cover them, and this begins political interference. My point being, to give an example of a tidbit of truth with the free men on the land nonsense. Again, I'm not advocating for or even against this particular movement.